Bum, 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 ba-da-dum. Hey, kia ora, Helen Brums here, coming to you live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1188. It is Family History Month. It is the last day of October, and it's a wrap. We've had a great month looking at different topics to do with genealogy, different ways to do research, different places you can look, and things like that. So I thought it'd be good to go back and recap the month and just have a look at some of the frequently asked questions that we've had along the way and see if we can answer some of those questions. And hang on, we've got a tangle here. There we go. Now, glass can sit in the right place. So I hope that you have enjoyed hanging out with us this past month for family history and learning some stuff about genealogy, what goes into researching it, some different places that you can look when you're researching your own family tree. One of the questions that we do have, though, is how long does it take to research your family tree? Well, from personal experience, just with my own tree, I have about 8,600 people in my tree, and I've been working on, and some of it has come from research my grandfather has done. Some of it has come from research my mum has done. Then I've picked it up from there and carried on. And I have been looking at this, I've been working on this tree for over 20 years from when I took it over from my mum. It's been over 20 years since I took it over from my mum. And and I'm at 8,600. And I know for a fact that there are errors in my tree because back in the day when everything was online and it was brand new online and all of that, I was like, oh, this tree belongs in my tree. Click. Very quickly learned that, no, that doesn't work. And so I started learning how to be more cautious about what information I was putting into my tree and verifying it before I put it in there. So I know there are some errors in there that I do have to go back at some point and correct them. And I'll probably be, as I come across them, that they will get corrected. You got 8,600 people in there. I also know that within that tree of that 8,600, there's a lot of little micro trees as well. And a micro tree is you've got the main tree, and then you need to, you've come across a family group that you know fits in your tree somewhere. You're just not sure where or who it attaches to, but you got to find that connection. So you can create a relationship within to anybody in the tree, and then once you've got that person in there, you can actually go out and sever that relationship, which leaves their little family group just floating around in there in its own little micro tree and everything else. And at some point, yes, we will. And I have over time found some of those little micro trees and been able to put them into the main tree. But I also know that somewhere in my main tree that there are still some errors in there, and I do have a lot of micros still floating around. So I've been doing over 20 years. I've got 8,800 people in the tree. I have gone back on some legs about 7 generations. If you want to know how far back that is, that's generation 1, then my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my second great-grandparents, my third great-grandparents, my fourth great-grandparents. And in some cases, I actually do have fifth great-grandparents in there. So that's actually 8 generations I've gone back. And I know there's a lot more research to do. The thing with genealogy is that you have to remember it is the ultimate puzzle. You will never, ever finish it. It is the ultimate puzzle. And the reason you will never finish it is because there's records that have been lost along the years. There's been records that have been lost. There's just so many people in the tree, because every generation you go back, you double the number of people that are in your direct line. So in your pedigree is your direct line. So my pedigree is, you go parents, 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 second great-grandparents, 32 third great-grandparents. Hang on, I'm up to that one already, am I? Yeah, so you're already at 32 people just in one generation. So there's a lot of people. And then in some instances, And some I still just have the pedigree going back, and other ones I've got siblings out to the side and that sort of thing. But I do know I have errors in there. I say I've only gone back in some to like 8 generations. I know that there's some of my legs that go back even further, but I don't quite acknowledge them because I know that the information there is incorrect. So yes, so I've been working on it for over 20 years and have 8,600 people listed in my tree, not necessarily all joined up. So there's like little micro trees in there as well as my main tree and little micro trees. Saplings, we'll call them saplings. So there's some saplings in there that need to be connected to the big tree, or some branches that have fallen off that need to be put back on the tree. That doesn't quite sound right, does it? It needs to be grafted back into the tree. So how long does it take to research your family history? It depends on how far back you want to go. Do you just want to go to grandparents or great-grandparents? Do you want to go a little further? How much information do you want to find on the people? And when you sit down and go, right, I'm going to research my family tree, it can be a big thing. It's like going to the library going, I'm going to read a book. How many books can you find in a library? Yeah, I'm going to read a book, go into a library. Okay, well, which book are you going to read? You need to get it down to one question. One question. It could be that you may have birth, death, and marriage information for, say, your great-grandfather on your father's side. Your paternal grandfather's father, you have his birth, death, and marriage information, but you want to find out a little more with him, like, where did he grow up? Where did he go to school? What census reports can I find? So what more information can I find about this particular person? And then you can start researching on those, like where did he live? More information about what was his occupation, just finding out what was his occupation and things like that. But also verifying the information so we always start off with verifying the information that we already have. That's the first place we start. And then from there, once we've verified that information, we can then go to the next level of what's the question that we want to ask? What's the question that we need the answer to? Like, where did my great-grandfather live? And so then we can start researching the census reports and seeing if we can find them in census reports to find out where he lived. And when we find the census reports, if it's after 1850, it will also tell us what his occupation was. So there's those sorts of things as well. And then when you find out when he lived in another country, your next question could be, after you've answered all the questions where you think he lives, your next question could be well, when did he arrive in the US? If he went from the US, or if he went from England to New Zealand, England to Australia, Europe to America, when did he arrive in the US? And you can find that during your census reports. You find him and information relating to the country that he was originally in. And then all of a sudden you find him on census report. You can't find any more information there. So you move to let me try the US. You can't find the US, so try Canada. Because some people came in through Canada, spent some time in Canada before they moved down to the US. Or some people came directly. I have one portion of my family, of my second great-grandfather, his family, him and his siblings, some stayed in England, some went to Canada, some went to the US, some went to Australia, some went to New Zealand. Who went where and when? So, that's another question that you could look at. So it's not just going, well, I'm going to research the family tree. Yeah, what's one question you're going to ask? And research the question first. As any research that you do, if you look at scientists, when they're researching different things, they come up with a theory or a hypothesis, and then they then have to go out and either prove or disprove that theory. You're doing the exact same thing with genealogy. You're coming up with your question, your hypothesis, your research question, and you're going and you're heading out now to prove or disprove it. In the case of where did my grandfather live? Where did he grow up? That's a little more different than, well, they said he came to the country they said he immigrated into the US in this particular time. So now you need to go and find out, did he actually immigrate into the US at that particular time? Or did he come in through Canada? Did he, what trek did he take to get to where you knew that he lived? How did he get there? Was he born and raised in the area, or did he come from some other area, some other state, and was born there? Was born in a different state or a different country. So it's finding those questions. So how long is it going to take to research your family tree? It can take you years. I kid you not. But it's that one, answering that one question. Got one client who wanted to know, am I related to this famous person? So we set out to prove that, to prove whether or not. We're still in the place where maybe, because we haven't found that connection, there is a high possibility they could be a distant cousin. And that's what we found. But in the meantime, we found they were related to another famous person, to a famous event that took place. They had people involved in a famous event that took place that we're working on to find out if it was because they were in the right place at the right time where this event took place. They were in the right place at the right time when this event took place. So were they related to the main family that was involved in that particular incident? And so we're researching on that. That's a question. They were in the right place at the right time. We have proven that. But were they related to the family that was actually involved in that incident? The fact that they have the last name heightens the possibility even greater. But we're still eventually going to look for that connection back to the original famous person. So right now we're saying, not that we can trace back yet. We even found a book from 1942 that was published in 1942 that had the tree in there, and we found this after we'd done a lot of research, and it confirmed everything that we had in our tree so far. So we knew we were on the right track. And these were people that had researched the book, had done the research with boots on the ground, walking into the different offices and everything else, churches and records and different things, and actually viewing physical records to put this information together. And when they got this information put together, they then created, this one person collated everything that had been gathered by these other people that helped them with the research, and put everything together. Everything that they had in that book, we had been able to verify, and we found the book after we had done a lot of research, and we had gotten back to that point, and all of a sudden we stumbled across the book, and what the heck's this? And have a look and go, oh, well, they were doing boots on the ground research. They were actually looking at paper. They were actually looking at the actual records and everything to get this. So because they had all the information, everything was sourced. They had where they got the information from and everything in this book. So it's like, okay, let's go see what differences do I have in what I have researched so far, what we've researched so far, and what they have in the book. It was the same. And the cool part is that it said, and they labeled the legs A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I think they went up to. But they said that A, which is the branch that my client came off, and C, which is the one that she was wondering if was connected to her family, they said there is a strong possibility that A and C are actually related. They just, but the documentation wasn't available for them at the time they were doing the research to be able to confirm that. So even in even they were saying the same thing. So we're sort of like, okay, let's see what else we can find. And so every now and again, I go back and I pick up that question again and start doing a little more research. So it's interesting. It's just interesting that there's times that you will get as far as you can on that, and you're like, okay, I need to take a break, and you go and research another area. It could be even a different tree. I had to call Ancestry one time, and they looked at me and she says, oh my. I go, what's the oh my? And she turns around and she says, do you realize you have about 30 plus trees in here? I went, yep. She says, oh, okay then. She says, are they all related? I went, nope. I said, these ones here are my family. I said, the rest of them are all my clients. And she's like, oh, okay. She says, you have done a lot of research. I said, yes, I have. But I've actually been with Ancestry since they first came online. And I will use their free service until they started charging. As soon as they started charging, it was worth me to get the membership at the time, the subscription at the time, because they then had access to records that I needed to get access to. And so I've been a paying member with Ancestry for over 21 years. I think it was like 2000. It says 21 plus years in my profile on Ancestry that I've been a paid member with them, but I was with them before that, before they had the paid membership. And I'm still learning different aspects of Ancestry and what it's capable of and all of that, even 20 plus years later. There's just so much functionality. That and FamilySearch.org, I've been with them since about the same length of time as well, because they both came online around the same time. So again, and the tools that they have brought on board over the years that has helped us search and everything else. So yeah. So researching family tree, it depends what question you want to ask and then going about and finding it. So I mean, one client to me said, "Oh, we want to know if our father was adopted or not," and I'm like, "Okay." And so that was the question that we asked, and I had the answer in 10 minutes. Others I've been working on for a while. So it depends on what you're looking for, what information you're trying to find as well. So you can find out things like, what occupations did your ancestors have? When did your ancestors immigrate into the country? Where did they immigrate from? Why did they immigrate? You may be able to answer that question as well, because when you look at when they immigrated, you can go back in history to see what was going on, look at historical events that were taking place in that country at that time, and that may provide you with some answers as to why they left. Did they leave for religious reasons? Did they leave because they had nowhere to live at the time? Maybe it was after the war or something, and their town no longer existed. Their town was wiped out during the war. Or it could have been, it may not have been a world war. It could have been a local in-country battle that have taken place. So look at when they immigrated, and then go back and look in history to see what historical events took place in that country during that time, to see what possible reasons there could be for why they left. We talked about finding interesting family stories as well. We talked about vital records. What are they? What they can tell us. So vital records being birth, deaths, and marriage certificates, and finding out that information. Birth records can tell information like who were the parents, what were the mother's maiden name, when were they born, where were they born, who provided the information, how were they related to the family. That's just on the birth records. And on some birth records in some countries, if the mother was not married at the time the child was born, the father is not listed. But if the father is listed, then in some countries, and it depends what the law of the country was at the time, so you need to take that into account as well. Did they record the father on there, whether or not they were married? And if they weren't married at the time and the father was not listed, how can you find the father's name? Quite often on some birth records, you will find the father is the informant for that birth record. And, and one country says, how is it that you came to this information? And they go, I was present at the birth. And I'm like, can't get more firsthand knowledge than that. Marriage records can tell us things like who's getting married. So it's got the groom's name, the bride's name, complete with her maiden name. It may tell you their age. It could just say, full age, which meant that they were of the age of consent where they did not require parental consent. If they were under whatever the age was at the time in that place, then they will have a record on there that the consent was given by the parents or by the father. On the marriage certificate, you typically find the father's information there as well, who he was and what his occupation was. And occasionally you will find the mother's name on there as well, along with her maiden name. So, and again, these records all depend on what time, when the records were generated. So what years the records were generated, what the laws were at the time. In some places, they weren't required to register a birth. They weren't required to register a marriage, but it may be on the church records. And the church records, when it comes to the birth, may not have the birth there, but they may have the baptism date on there, or baptism/christening date. And depending on the church, they may have written in there, born on such and such a date. And that's how I found my my third great-grandfather, because I found his baptismal record, and on there it had written what his birth date was. And so we were able to go back and look at that time, and we found his birth certificate that way. So there's those sorts of things that you can find as well. On death certificates, on death records, you can find information like what was the name of the person, if they were married. If it was a woman and she was married, what was her maiden name? The maiden name being the name she was born with. You may find on there who the informant is. You may find on there how many issues they had, issues being children that were still living. And it might have like F60, M59, meaning they've got a female that's 60 at the time the person died. There was a male who was 59, and then but it only lists male or female and the age. So you can find that information. You may find the parents' information on there if it is known by the person who is informing. You'll find the name of the informant on there. You'll find when and where they died and why or how they died. And death records with how they died is really good information, because you could see a medical trait coming down through the family. Was there a line where people were dying from heart conditions? And then you go out to, and so you've got the direct line, but also go out to the sidelines on those ones too and find the death certificates or the death registrations for siblings of the grandparents in your tree to see what they died of too. Because if it's heart disease that runs through the family, then you've got to, there's a possible cause. It could be heart, that it could still be there in the family. So it's looking to see what medical conditions come down through the tree as to how people died and things. And yes, you will find some surprises on death certificates, especially if you did not know that maybe the person died of a gunshot wound or a stab wound or were hung, that where they were murdered. It could have been an accidental death. It's already not, they could have died from a result of an accident. So it's looking for that information as well. So be prepared that you may not find a medical condition as to why somebody died. It could be that they were helped along in some way, be it from an accident or somebody's intent on killing them. You'll even find suicides listed in there as well. So be prepared for that information too, especially if you're going through looking for why people died. So there's a lot of information you can get from that. We also talked about newspapers. I love newspapers. Newspapers are awesome because not only can you read to see what was happening at the time, but when you get to the society pages, you've got birth announcements, death announcements, marriage announcements, engagement announcements. You may have a full article there on the actual wedding, which talks about this is the bride, she was the child of, and it'll have the parents listed. Here's the groom and here's his parents. And then it's, these are the people that were in their bridal party, and it tells you how they're related to the person. Are they a friend? Are they a sibling? Are they the groom's sibling if it's on the bride's side and it's a female? Could it be the groom's sister? And it's all listed there for you. It tells you what they were wearing. It describes their dresses and the suits that they were wearing. And then on some of them, they will even list the entire guest list of everybody that was there. And it may even say like groom's family, and here's all the names, bride's family, and here's all the names, and then friends, and here's the names. So it may even list it that way as well. You can find out a whole bunch of stuff. You can find out, if you're looking back in the 1800s through to about 1960s, 1970s, you can find out if people were admitted to a hospital, what day they were admitted, why they were admitted, when they were, it may even give you an update while they're still in hospital. You may find out the date that they left the hospital to head home, and it has their home address on there as well. I tell you, there's a lot of cool stuff you can find in newspapers. And this is just on their society announcement pages. You can find out, who had what organizations, be it a charity, an association, a club, a church group, a school group like PTA or something like that, what meetings that they held, what functions did they have, what balls and galas did they have as well, and it will describe it may even have the guest list there. If you had a milestone birthday party, that could be in there too, along with a list of all the guests that were there. And yes, it will list the family members as well. So there's a lot of information that you can find just in those pages on a newspaper. As far as the other stuff goes, you've got sporting results there for anybody who was in your family who was in a sports team. You may find if they play, based on the sport that they played, you may find results from some competition that they were in. You may find newspaper articles where they were involved in something, and there's some news story there that they were somehow involved in. So there's lots of information, especially the history, finding out the history, what was happening at the time. So it gives you some idea of what was going on. And also to look at the commercials, at the advertisements that are in the newspapers too, because they can tell you a lot. Like tire, was it one time we were looking on here and we found tires for like $1.39 or something, and I'm like, well, I'll take tires for $1.39. I think the tires on the RV, I'm trying to remember, I think it cost me $700 for the two front tires when I got them replaced. Yeah, I would have liked to have paid $3.39 for a new tire. I would love that. So, looking for different information about the area that your family lived in, what was happening at the time, and things like that. So, and you can find obituaries in there as well, which can give you a lot of information. Depending on how detailed the submission was for the obituary, you could find out who their spouse was, who their children were, who their children got married to, the names of the grandchildren, maybe even the great-grandchildren, the siblings, the parents, And it may have may have them listed, and then after their names might have in brackets that they were deceased. So there's a whole bunch of information you can find in there too. Then we talked about graveyards and cemeteries and the difference between the two. Graveyards being that private burial area. It could be a graveyard on a family estate that's been, an estate that's been in the family for years. Usually graveyards are associated with churches where they have their burial area, the consecrated ground where the burial area is next to a church. And then cemeteries are the public spaces where where people can be buried and that sort of thing. We learned about what you can find in cemetery records. For the graveyards, it's finding the church records and what's listed in the church records. For the funeral, and then where in the grounds they were buried, and if there's anybody else in that same plot with them. On cemetery records, you can find out who purchased that plot, who made the purchase of the plot, who's buried in there, whose ashes are in there, and sometimes it may be more than what is actually listed on the tombstone. So that's another great source of references as well. We also talked about hints and tips for finding needles in the haystack, different places that you could go to look for different clues and things like that as well. Just going back through the thing. Looking at how you can tackle solving a mystery. And that's going back to that question, what happened to this person? We can find all their records up here, but we can't find a death record. Like, I'm looking for my fourth great-grandfather. What happened to him? We don't know. We know that it sounds like from the documentation that we can find that he may have died at some point. So one of the places I'm going to go and look next is actually shipping records, because on one of the census reports, on his son's wedding marriage certificate had listed that he was a foreign agent. I thought he was a spy. It turns out he's a jeweler, and he was probably one of those traveling ones that would get on the ships, go to the east, get the gemstones from the east and bring them back and create them into the pieces of jewelry. And so maybe he drowned at sea or died at sea or something like that. I don't know, but that's one of the things I'm going to be looking at is passenger lists leaving from England to the east, to the Orient, to see if he was on any of those ships during his lifetime, and maybe he died on a ship on the way back. You never know. Family interview questions. We talked about things that you could use as memory joggers, like photographs. We talked about that, we have a list of 100 family interview questions, which you can get at beforethedirtnapfamily.com. And there's 100 questions in there that you can ask. You don't just sit down and rattle them all off, but it's taking that time to set up the time to sit with the person and just doing it in 30-minute chunks. And this is with the people who are still living, and start with the oldest generation first. And ask them questions, about their childhood. What do they remember? How many siblings did they have? Do they still have any siblings alive? There could be stuff that you don't even know about yet. So there's just the questions are there to be memory joggers, but also use things like photo albums. If there's stuff in their house that was inherited from a grandparent or a parent, let's see. It could be that this could be like the gold duck. Where did the gold duck come from? Oh, I got that from my grandmother. Oh, where did she get it from? Oh, she inherited it from her mother. So now this golden duck is like three generations. Yeah, because it's now from your great grandparents. Well, where did she get it from? Oh, well, it was given to her for their 50th wedding anniversary, for their golden wedding anniversary, on their 50th anniversary, which took place in blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Now all of a sudden you have a possible year that they got married. So you can find out questions like this just by asking things, it could be, some people have spoon collections. My grandmother loved collecting salt and pepper shakers and badges. So and it wasn't just any badge, it was military badges. So when you get the insignias, especially on the US uniforms, where you get the badges that state what infantry, what battalion they belonged to, what trade they were in, if they were drivers, if they were chaplains, the chaplains have the little crosses on there, if they were a medic, that sort of thing as well. So they have all those insignias. My grandmother collected them. And a lot of times she got ones from places that would not normally give a set of badges out, but because she was the only female military badge collector they'd ever heard of, she would get given a complete set just for writing a letter. She get this package in return. It was it was actually really, really interesting. What else did we talk about in Family History Month? Uncovering surprises. And these can come up anywhere. You'll find surprises anywhere. On census reports, you may find siblings that you didn't know that your grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents had, but they could be listed there on the census report. You could find cousins on there as well, because they may say niece or nephew. There's, again, on the death certificates, finding out how somebody died. Finding a newspaper article that then supports what's written on the death certificate as well is another way that you can do that too. So when you're looking to say, what happened to this person, and you go searching through newspapers and things, and you come across articles, and it's like, oh, that person was charged with failure to pay a debt, or fraud, or divorce proceedings, something like that. So now you can go back and have a look through the record, through the official records rather than just newspaper, to see, was that person actually your ancestor? So there's surprises all over the place. Finding out that, this particular parent wasn't actually their parent. It might have been a step parent, but they knew that person as their parent, and this is who they're, and you find the actual birth certificate and find out that they were actually had somebody else as a parent. Could have been that they were adopted and nobody knew about it. Talk about glancing sideways. So when you're going up through your pedigree tree, don't forget about the siblings, because sometimes the siblings can provide the clues to give you more information about the parents. So don't forget about the glancing sideways. Why did that not move? I'm going back through my notes here. By the numbers, looking at census records. What information can census records tell you? Well, it depends on the year and where it was. In England, they do theirs on the years ending in 1. Here in the United States, they do it on the years ending in 0. Canada is the same way as well. New York, for a while, was also doing an intermediate census, which would be on the years ending with 5. And there's lots of different things, and depending on the questions as to what you can find. Relationships in the family, up until about, I think it was 1841 in England, where they listed the names, but they did not list the relationships. They just listed the names of the people in the household. It wasn't until 1851 that they started putting down, this is the head of the house, this is his wife, here are their children, here's their mother-in-law, their father-in-law, their brother-in-law, their sisters, their nieces, their nephews, that you started seeing those, this person was the maid, this is a visitor, this is a boarder. You start seeing that sort of information appearing in the 1851 census. And I can't remember, I think it was around the same time here in the States they started doing that as well, around the 1850s. We also looked at probate revelations. So probate records, wills, testaments. And when you're looking at the probate records, it's the last will and testament of the person, then anything that was filed during the probate process, a complete inventory of everything that person owned, along with the dollar value and all of that. Who are the executors of the estate? Who was the estate being left to? Were there any surprises in the probate and the will? Were there any anybody disputing the will, the validity of it? Were people trying to say that is not the last will and testament? This is it here. Dispute, those sorts of things. But there's a lot of good information that you can find from a probate record. Any land that the person owned, any real estate land, even down to their livestock. How many spoons did they have in the house, and everything is itemized on the inventory list with a dollar value next to it, so they could work out the value of the property, and then how it was going to be divided up and that sort of thing as well. Things to know about dates, like putting the date in with day, month, year, and spelling out the month, not putting 04/06/1922, because 04/06 in a lot of countries is the 4th of June. Here in the States, it is April 6th. So taking out the guesswork out of that, when you're doing dates, please remember to spell the month out in full. The preferred format is day, month, year. But if you're somebody that you got to put the month first, spell the month out. Always spell the month out, even if it's the first 3 letters. of the month, or you can put the month in full. It must be spelt out so there is no confusion on anything under the number 12 as to which is a month and which is a day. So please keep that in mind. Please, 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 please. It is really hard when you come across records and they've got 4/6/1922. And I would look at that and go 4th of June. Other people would look, and Americans would look at that and go, oh, April 6th. But if it had 4 June 1922, there is no confusion. So please remember to spell out the month. So we talked about that. What else did we talk about? We talked about looking at the different organizations of associations, clubs, sports teams, charities, church communities, the schools with the PTAs or the booster clubs, any organization that your ancestors could have been members of, even by trade. They could have the Farmers Association or the Apple Growers Co-op. So in looking at any of those, did your ancestors hold any office within those organizations? Getting access to the organization records to find out more information, you'd have to contact the organization to see if they still had their records, or if not, they could tell you where the records now are, where are they archived and things like that as well. And you can look through minutes and then look in newspapers for anything about that organizations as well. We talked about immigration and people moving around and how to find out about people moving around. You've got the immigration records, you've got immigration records. So immigration are those leaving a country, immigration are the incoming. And looking at immigration records and passenger lists on ships, specifically ships, to see if your ancestors are listed on there and what information you can glean from them based on what sort of records they kept for their passenger lists. You also have naturalization records for people when they get to a new country. Do they apply for citizenship within that country? And seeing the naturalization records for that as well. I never did talk about criminal records, did I? Oh, that's a cool one. And only because my great-grand uncle, I actually have photographs of the documentation when he was arrested for treason in Sydney during World War II. He was a Nazi sympathizer and somehow ended up, even though he was in Australia, somehow ended up with looking after money for the Nazis and actually embezzling it all. He was a tyrant. And then there's newspaper reports of charges he was brought up on as a landlord, how he would turn off the heat whenever he wanted to, or turn off the water in the middle of winter. He would turn off the water in the building. He was a tyrant. He really was. He was a tyrant. And reading all this information, and he's actually listed, there's a whole chapter of him in this book that's called Australia's Most Dangerous Men. And even though he was born in New Zealand, he said that he was born at sea off the coast of California. And in another place, he claims that he was German, but the Germans said, he's not one of us. He is of German descent, yes. Then he's stating that he was American, and they were trying to, and then we'll prove that you're American. Where's your birth certificate? Oh, I can't give you my birth certificate because I was born in San Francisco and all their records were destroyed during the fires and the earthquakes and blah, 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 blah. Always had an excuse as to why he couldn't do that. So there was a lot of inquiries to the US about, is he a citizen? And they said, nope. And because he was actually born and raised in New Zealand and later moved to Australia, there was a thing at the time that you couldn't extradite a New Zealander back to, you couldn't send them back to New Zealand at that point. It's a little more different now. So they couldn't send him back to New Zealand. They just had to deal with him. Very interesting things. But you can find out, through immigration records, naturalization records, census reports, city directories, voting registers as well. Will show you, if you're looking for one particular ancestor. There's one I was looking for a client, and we could verify this on the census report as well as in the city directory. They never moved. They moved into this particular house. We have the deed when they bought the house. And they stayed there all these years, and they actually died in that house. So it was one of those people who were there for a very, very long time, a lot of years. And we could see that consistently through the voters' registration reports, through the city directories, through their obituary that gave that addresses where they died. They moved there a few years after they got married and basically raised all their kids there. And then other ones, you're finding them moving around a lot. And others might move 2 or 3 times during their lifetime. Others, they were in this state then, they were then over in this state, and And when you're finding newspaper reports, even in some places, you can find some employment records. You find out where they worked, and and if you're looking in the Nosy Society, I call them the Nosy, in the society pages, you may find that they have just arrived in this area. They've just been transferred in with such and such a company. You may even find that in the newspapers as well. So that's a quick wrap up of what we've done over this last month. We have covered a lot, and we've only just scratched the surface of genealogy. There's a whole bunch of stuff we didn't even talk about, haven't looked at yet, and we'll come back to it from time to time. And I'll keep notes and stories for you for October next year, for when we do Family History Month again, or if it comes up with another Family History or Genealogy Month or something along the way, we'll have more stories and stuff for you as well. Tomorrow, my class is underway, my 7-week class on the principles of genealogy with Boston University. It's a 7-week intensive class, starts tomorrow. And I am super looking forward to that. I've gone through my schedule. I have study periods in there. And next week I have the Leverage Conference, which not only am I emceeing, but I'm also speaking on Friday about genealogy, why it's important to know your genealogy for business, which is going to be interesting. The following week, we've got Networking Riches. If you're interested in coming to either of those events, the Leverage Conference is Thursday, Friday, Saturday next week, on the 10th through the 12th. Networking Riches is the following Tuesday and Wednesday. If you're interested in coming to either of those events, please private message me and I will give you the link so you can go and sign up. And of course, we've got Thanksgiving in there in the next 7 weeks. And I've got a niece getting married on Thanksgiving Sunday in California. So it's a very busy time coming up. And I decided to do a 7-week genealogy class. Go figure that. I don't know. I just like to be busy. It's just me and Zeph. So, just here by ourselves. So we just like to be busy. And found out today that there's quite a few people within the portion of the resort that we live in that have come down with COVID. So I am taking all my preventative stuff, my immunity boosters and everything else, to keep that away from me. I have been very fortunate, touch wood, that I have not come down with COVID at all. And I am one of the few that cannot be vaccinated due to allergies. And so I have to be super, super cautious. So with knowing that it's out there, I'm, usually when I walk Zeph in the evening, I very rarely meet anybody along the way when I'm out walking her. And especially since now it's dark, because everybody wants to get out while it's still daylight. And so when we go out walking at 7 o'clock at night, it's dark. So I've got my flashlight, I've got my reflective vest on, and we just stay away from other people. And in the mornings, I try to go out at a time when I know there's not a lot of other people out as well anyway. So I take a lot of precautions prior to that, and now I'm just going to be even more cautious. And I've amped up my preventative stuff. So we will see how that goes. It's all hands on deck come tomorrow morning, and I am so excited for what's going to be happening over the next 7 weeks. And you guys get to go on that journey with me as we go over the next 7 weeks, when I am 7 weeks of genealogy, learning stuff every day. I've got study period time blocked in my calendar every single day. Even on the days when I'm working the conferences, that were the 2 conferences that I'm working, I've got study periods blocked in there. Even if it's just like 30 minutes, I'm doing studying every day. I'm getting the habit of studying every day. Because they say we need to do 10 to 15 hours a week. So I am slotting it in wherever I have any free time right now. It has been slotted in. And on top of all of that, it's November tomorrow, which means that for me personally, it is my James Bond Fest month, where I'm going to be watching all 25 James Bond movies from Dr. No through to, I don't even remember I've only watched the last one once, and I can't remember what the name of it is. It's totally escaped. Something about living. I gone a complete blank on the 25th, but I'll be starting with Dr. No and working my way through all 25 of the James Bond franchise movies during the month of November. So maybe some days I don't get to watch a movie, but I have it all blocked in my calendar as my movie time. So It's going to be a fun month. So you'll get to come along that journey with me. But as of now, I am out of here. I got a puppy that needs to go for a walk, and I come back and have dinner. We got chicken and salad for dinner tonight. Yay! I got groceries today. I get groceries delivered, so I don't have to go anywhere where I can be exposed to too many people. So yes, we got rotisserie chicken, and I've got a broccoli salad thing to make up. So that'll be fun. So yes, so got to go walk the dog so I can come back and have that. And I will probably have a puppy sitting right here next to me going, can I have some, please? But she'll be looking at my plate, and I'll look at her, and she'll just sit there and look off in the distance like, I have no idea. I'm not paying attention to what you're eating. But go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening. Yeah, it's what do you have going on in November? Let us know in the comments below. What's happening during your month in November, what you've got on your schedule for November. It'll be awesome to see. Anyway, go have a super fantastic sparkling evening. Hey, konara.